CMPRadio.net. It's the station. CMPRadio.net, the voice of Chester.
Also known as Donna Janel, CEO and founder of Parenting with a Purpose. Our strive here at the podcast is to reach every home, whether single moms, married, single dads, whatever it is, foster parents, whatever, just bringing the ownership and responsibility and nobility back into parenting. Get comfortable with uncomfortable conversations. All parents need some help and guidance, and I'm just here to be a guide. Hey everybody, welcome to Parenting with a Purpose. I am your host, Donna Janel. As you know, we are aimed to bring back the responsibility, nobility, and beauty back into parenting. We are here every Thursday at 7 p.m. bringing engaging conversations that affect the community. As you know, parenting comes in all shapes, different sizes. So the aim here is that we hit every household. You know, there's no book for parenting. There's no rule book. There's no instructions. You know, we kind of just parent on the way that either we were raised or the way that God has given us the vision how to parent our family. You know, so there's a lot of things going on with families. You know, we have blended families. We have single mom families. We have single dad families. We have families that went through some tragedies. We have families that are doing great things in the community. We have families from all shapes and sizes, you know, from poverty to, you know, the wealthiest families. And our aim is to touch every family and try to get into your life a little bit so that, and not to change who you are, but to help you maybe navigate this parenting, because, you know, parenting it's a hard knock life out here for us parents. So, and it's not easy. Parenting is not for the weak, okay? So through the trials and tribulations, the ups and downs, the ins and outs, and you know, we got to just bring the beauty back into it, because parenting is beautiful. Although it's hard, trust me, I got a couple gray hairs up in here now with the teenagers. It's hard, but it's doable. So tonight, our guest tonight is, you know, as you know, every week we bring a different guest who's dealing with different situations. And tonight, our guest is none other than Catrina Jacobs. And tonight's topic, though, we're talking about how to live, how to start a new life after your children have passed away. Children or child, you know, in this case, we have multiple children that we're going to be talking about tonight. And just how do you get through life, or how do you, you know, help people? Where do you get the wheels to keep going? Okay. So tonight I want to introduce, before I introduce, I'm just going to tell a little bit of statistics about what the topic is tonight. So, you know, SIDS is one of the leading cause of death in babies. That is the leading cause in death in babies, and that is not just a gender. I mean, it's not gender and it's not race bound. It is literally just babies. SIDS is one of the leading causes. The second one is cancer. Cancer is one of the I think cancer is the second leading cause. Cancer is the second leading cause in children, death for children as well. So we're talking about SIDS, we're talking about cancer, and then, you know, we had someone on the show before and we talked about homicide, and homicide is the third leading cause. So this mom who we have tonight, Catrina Jacobs, she's experienced all three of them. She experienced 1, 2, and 3. So we have her here. Welcome to the show, Catrina.
Thanks for having me.
All right. So Catrina is going to sit here and we're going to have this conversation just about, you know, because I mean, Catrina, you've had your share of mother grief. You know, as we talk about it tonight, as I was writing this, just thinking about the different. Originally, I was going to have you come on the show because I know the story about your son Sharif, who passed away from cancer. Mm-hmm. But then my sister reminded me, because she's a friend of yours, the other children that that have also passed away. And I'm like, well, how's she rocking out the way she did? Like, you are just like a saint, a blessed woman, because I see you shaking and moving in the community and keep serving. Like, it's like you got hit with so many different things, but yet you still found a way to be a service. So tell us a little bit about yourself.
I'm a mom. My name is Catrina Jacobs. I'm originally from Chester, PA. I'm the youngest of 8 kids. I've been brought up and raised in Chester. Our church is in Chester, so I think that's where I get the drive from. It's just being involved in the community. My grandma was the first female pastor here in Chester, and so I learned a lot of the service part from growing up in the ministry.
Right.
And so that's that part. I'm actually an author as well. Yeah. I have a book out called A Walk of Faith. It's about my own personal journey, and it's telling people how to walk by faith. And so for me, I put my personal faith to work on a daily basis, and so that's kind of where I'm at on today.
Right. So I know 3 of your children has transitioned. So how many children in total do you have, or had, or how many?
So altogether, I had a total of 7. And so I lost my first child when I was 22. She was born with hypoplastic left heart syndrome, and so she lived to be about 4 months.
Okay.
So she had open heart surgery 2 days old, and so when I had her, the first thing was, they were saying if she didn't have the surgery, she wouldn't have made it. Mm-hmm. And so being pregnant, I had the option of having an abortion or having the option of having her. And so I chose to have her and give life. And she went through open heart surgery. So I went through watching all of that, how the heart beats inside out. It was a lot of traumatic things that I seen through that process. But I just wanted to give her, a chance at life.
All right. You was 22.
I was about 22.
That's very young to be dealing with, that's that kind of situation. Wow. And so at 22, and then how did you, your goal was, listen, you didn't want to abort her, you didn't want it to do, because of that, they tell us, they do all these tests and stuff, they tell us and they give parents the option, but it's kind of hard for you to ask a parent, hey, listen, you're carrying this child, A, B, and C has happened to this child, so you have a choice for this child to have life or death. Mm-hmm. And then, as you said, you're a woman of faith, so it's like, why not? Like, who are we to make that decision?
That decision, right.
So the fact that you was like, we're going to rock out with whatever happens, right?
So that was my goal, was to give her, life. And then the thing about it, if I would have got an abortion, because of where I was in my pregnancy, I had to, fly away somewhere. I can't even remember where it was at, but that was the only place that I could have received an abortion due to where I was in my pregnancy. Right. And so I'm like, I'm putting myself at risk. So it was just a lot of things that would have took place at that time, and so I didn't want to go down that route.
Right. Okay. All right. And then she eventually...
Yeah, she eventually passed at about 4 months.
Okay. And then after that, how many kids had you had at that point?
So at that time, I actually had a total of 4 kids. So I had Pierre, Sharif, James, and then I had Janiah Hope, which was baby Hope. And so that took me through a loop. I was 22, and when I had her, I always tell people I kind of lost it. Like, I lost it mentally. I really didn't know how to deal with grief. I really didn't see anybody in my immediate circle deal with someone that passed away that close. Right. And so I felt like I was like on an island all by myself, because I was dealing with something that I really couldn't explain.
Right. And I think also sometimes, the era where we come from, a lot of people don't talk about things, grief is not something I heard as a child at all. Like, I never even heard the word grief as a child. When something happens, typically children or whatever, we don't really hear about it because the adults are trying to deal with things themselves or cover up the things, right. Adults, I don't think we're really taught how to grieve. Like it's okay to grieve too. And I think that grief sometimes is very scary and people don't want to talk about it. And so sometimes you do feel like you're on an island by yourself. It's like nobody's really talking about it. Is anybody else dealing with it? And interesting enough that people were dealing with what you were dealing with, but you would never know. So then you kind of went through that and got yourself together.
Yes, I went through that. Again, I was young, so I kind of really went through like a whirlwind of things, like emotions. So about a year or two, it just was crazy. And so finally I kind of got myself back together. I went back to work. I went back to school. I remember laying there. I was at my mom's house. I had my own house. I moved out when I was 18, so I had my own house. And I remember going back to my mom's house. I had James at the time was 3 or 2, and Sharif would have been about 5, and Kiera was maybe 8 because they were all 3 years apart. And I remember going to my mom's, and I was laying there one day looking up at the ceiling. Like I was like in a daze. And I remember hearing the voice of the Lord say, what about your other kids? And so that's what really got me back up and got me back to the point of wanting to live again, because I didn't want to live. Right. I mean, I wanted to exist, but I wanted to be here. I didn't want to,
you didn't want to die, but you didn't want to
cut things off. But I just didn't know how to live. Like I didn't know how to really push through. And so when I thought about my other kids, I'm like, well, I'm their mom, so I really gotta, I don't want to like allow myself to go where I'm not able to do what I need to do for my kids. And so I remember getting back up. I got back up. I went back to high school. I got back up. I started at Widener, and I got back up, and I enrolled in college at Widener. And so I had to, like, my kids became my motivation.
Right.
My kids became my why, and so, yeah, that's kind of.
I think that's so important, because a lot of times, when you hear kids who've grown up, who their sibling passed away, and they say, and I said this on the show with somebody who was dealing with homicide, one of the things that the children say is that when I lost my sibling, when I lost my sister, I lost my brother, I lost my parents. Although my parents were here alive, right? They were here living, but because the grief have overtaken them so much that they weren't able to parent their other children. But I like what you said. You said you were down, you couldn't figure this out. But one thing you knew is that you had other children, and that was your motivation to get back up.
Yes.
Because you want to still give them life, and that promotes you. Say, listen, I'm here for a reason. There's purpose for me still to be alive because I have other children.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then I think my family, like having a really strong support system, my family kind of made it, I'm not going to say easy, but yes, easy, for me to want to live. They were there, they were supportive. And I used to say, I wonder if they really know how bad off I am. And so for me, coming from a Christian background, like going to my mom's house, I knew my mom was praying. Right. Like I knew my mom was in there praying for me. And so for me, it's like I know the power of prayer, you know. And so that's, again, how I can say I can walk by faith, because I knew, I guess being brought up in church, I knew that there was a God. Right. And I knew that even though I was going through something that I really couldn't understand, I knew that God was able, to eventually see me through.
Right. And that's so powerful that you say. A lot of times, people say we try to find things to hold on to catch up to. And a lot of times when people deal with tragedy at that magnitude, losing a child, a lot of times people go off and do something else, like drugs and alcohol, or sexing it up, or doing whatever, because the pain is real. So they don't really know how to cope with it. But if you have a connection with God, some type of spiritual source or anything, something that you can hold on to. And then also you said something really key. You said your family. And it takes, we always say that it takes a village to raise children, right? But it takes a village to raise us. Like, parents need a village too.
Oh yeah, a support system.
A support system, because you can't do this on your own. It's very hard. And not saying that they take our burdens away, but they help us and encourage us and motivate us to want to live again and want to do things right. So I think that was key there. Like, we all need a village. Yes. I need you. You need me to survive. We're all part of God's family. So I think that's also important. So then that happened, and then years later, then tell me about your next.
So with Sharif. So Sharif was it was 2017. Sharif was in the 12th grade, and so he got sick one day, and so it kind of went on for like 2 weeks. I actually thought the doctors at Crozier thought that he had mono, the kissing disease. And so I remember taking him there on, so what happened, I took him to Crozier on a Monday. That Thursday, Chest Penn called me and told me that they needed me to bring my son in because they noticed, they got the paperwork from the hospital. So Thursday, Chest Penn said, we noticed that his lipase numbers were elevated. And so they were saying that was his liver function. And so by that point, but they still didn't know what to do. So I took him to Chest Penn on a Saturday, February the 6th of 2017, and they still didn't know what to do. And I remember sitting there again, and again, the voice of the Lord, right? I'm always hearing what God is saying. And I remember I sat there and I heard him say, take your son to DuPont. So I went home. The men at my church, they were having noonday prayer. And so my sister said, when her husband was done, my brother-in-law, she said when he's done with noonday prayer, we'll take you to Delaware, because at this point I lived in Trainer. And so I went home and I kind of got my stuff together, and then they dropped me off at the hospital with my son. And I remember going, and the thing about it is I had all the paperwork from Chest Pen.
Right, okay.
And from the emergency room, so I took everything with me. And the doctor looked everything over, and within a couple of minutes, the doctor said, we're running tests, but she said, we believe that your son has cancer. And she said, from us looking, and she said, a lot of times it doesn't happen until kids are later in life where they notice that the child has cancer, where all of a sudden they'll get sick. Yeah. And so when I got there, he needed a transfusion. His arm was very low. They didn't even know. They said they didn't know how he still was living, because his arm was like a 6.6. Oh, wow. And he was still getting up, going to school, and he would come home and be like, oh, Mom, I'm tired. Again, we thought it was the flu, and then they told me, the kissing disease or whatever. And so by this point, when I got to DuPont, they ran the blood work. The next day was Sunday. They gave him a transfusion Monday. They did a bone marrow aspirate. Right. And on Wednesday, so right now we're like at February, however it was, a week went by, so it's February the 15th, my oldest daughter's 21st birthday, I found out for sure. We actually were getting ready to leave, and they said, we're waiting for one more test to come back, and if that test comes back, we know that he's anemic, but we don't know where it's coming from. Right. And then that's when they did further tests, and the bone marrow aspirate came back, and they found out that he had leukemia, acute lymphoblastic leukemia.
Wow, wow, that was a lot there, Catrina.
I know.
All right, and then as a nurse, my brain is going off till like, but so your son's sick. Right? You feel he's sick. You're thinking he got the flu or something. You take him one place, they say he got mono. The age he is, they probably thinking he got mono, right? Then. So at this point, he wasn't sick though, like really bad off. He was still going to school.
So what happened? So I guess to back up a little bit, he just seemed like he had a flu. And so it went on probably for like a week or two. And I remember saying to him, I said, Sharif, when Monday come, I'm going to send the other kids to school, and I'm going to take you to the doctor. Right. So again, I'm thinking it's the flu, because it's going on for like a week or two. And he would still go to school in between him not feeling well. He would kind of go to school, come home, but then he would go to sleep. Right, okay. Like, he might wake up, eat a little bit, but he just, at that point, he was just tired. And so when I took him to Crozier, again, they didn't think he had the flu or anything like that. So I'm like, okay. So by that point, again, a couple of days went by, and that's when his primary care physician got the paperwork. Right. And they were saying we need to do some more, testing or whatever. Right. And the doctor there, she didn't know what to do. And so when I sat there, I said, now look, this is going on. And my brain is a mom. And I took, health careers as well in school. And so I'm saying this is going on for a couple of weeks, and I'm like, my son is sick. Something else is going on, and I just don't know what. And I remember that's when I heard the voice say, take him to DuPont. Right. And so that's when they looked over the paperwork. They ran blood work. But when she looked at the paperwork right away, because of the lipase numbers and the functioning of them, of course, from being a nurse, and so what happened, and I'm going to back up a little bit. When Chest Pen called me Thursday, the same day, the emergency room doctor called me and say, how is your son doing? And so when he called me, I said, this is the most ironic thing ever. And so in my spirit, I knew that something else had to be going on. He didn't get me. He had left a message on my phone, and he said, how is your son doing? And so I was like, okay, something must not be right. Right. And then that's when my doctor followed up, later on. And, that's how we got to the point of getting to DuPont and all of that.
I think that is, before we go in, I want to talk about just the follow-up, though, because a lot of times we see there's something wrong with our kid, but we chop it up to the flu or whatever, and then they go on, but you as a mom, like, listen, something else is going on. Like, the flu don't last this long, and what's going on? And the fact that you took them there, and then you also did the follow-up, because here it is. A lot of times when we take our kids to the ER, well, half the time, a lot of people don't have primary care doctors who can actually follow up, right? So when we take sometimes we go to the ER ourselves or take our children, and then in the ER, they say follow up with your primary care for 2 to 3 days, right? Oh, yes. A lot of us, take all your medicine, take it to the skin, and follow up with your primary for 2 to 3 days. And sometimes people don't do that, so they're not able to know, or the phone numbers are not right, and doctors can't call the family. There's a lot of things that happen so that you can't get the proper follow-up. But I like the fact that not only did the ER call with the follow-up, but your primary care doctor, his primary care doctor, because immediately something's going on, we need to fix this instead of just waiting. And the fact that it was over the weekend, but yet it was still being taken care of. I think that's important. I think that's important to having, making sure that your kids are being followed by a pediatrician or a family doctor, so that they see this kid, they know different things, so that when they can see like a red light comes on, they're the professionals. We as mom, even me as a nurse in the medical field, listen, I'm not the doctor though.
Right.
They the one went to school for all that, and they can figure it out. So I think, I just want to plug in that make sure your children have primary care doctors, and make sure that they're being seen and that they're being followed up, because you need to, if something goes wrong, you need to be able to reach out to someone, and somebody needs to follow care. So then you go to AI, and then a couple of days you get, listen, your son got cancer. What did you?
So I remembered, it was the night before, which was Valentine's Day, and I remember the whole night crying. And I remembered, so my daughter Kayla's like 17 now, and at the time Kayla might have been 10. And I remember that night, the whole night, she was on the phone, and she was like, "Mom, it's gonna be okay." And she prayed for me, and I remember the way the sofa was. I was leaning on the sofa, and I'm just listening to her, and she's studying, encouraging me, and I'm like, "Lord, what am I to do?" Because I knew that next day was going to tell me something. Right. And so we get to that point again. We're all packed up, ready to go, and we're waiting for this last test. And the last test was the indicator to allow us to know what was going on. But what we did find out in those couple of days is that if they did find cancer, that we would automatically have to stay in the hospital for a month. Right. Because treatment had to start right away. Yeah. And so that was a Wednesday, and treatment started Friday. And so for 30 days or so, 35 days, I was in DuPont. I never went home. I had to tell my family, bring me clothes, bring me underclothes. And at the time I had my youngest son was like 1.5. So I had a newborn, like a small little guy, a 10-year-old. I think James was 13. And then Sharif was 17. So Kiara had just turned 21. So I still had some little people, in the midst of that. And so I had to kind of leave everything, because my goal was to make sure that my son was well. Right. That was my main concern, was because he was never sick. And so now he's sick with something that I can't, in so many words, fix with Tylenol. Right. You know what I mean? It was something that I couldn't give him a cup of tea. It was something that I couldn't put a Band-Aid on. And so I was there, day in and day out, getting the documents and reading them and looking over the medicines and finding out what was the side effects. Right. And so, it was a lot of that in that 30 days. Yes.
Wow. So here you are, packed up, ready to go. And then the final test came back and said, "Hey, listen, he got cancer." And you're like, okay, we're staying. We know we're staying. And during that time, though, did the hospital offer you counseling or services and different things to kind of?
So when they were ready to tell me kind of the diagnosis, they wanted to give me more. So after they told me that the paperwork came back, it was a little bit more extensive conversation that needed to take place. And so I remember saying to them, "Don't tell me anything else." I said, "Let me call my family." I'm the 8th child, and I remember calling my mom and all my siblings, and I was like, "Look, I need you guys to come to the hospital." I was like, "They're giving me information, and I can't handle this." And so they all came, within an hour or two. Wow. Everyone was there. We went into the big conference room, and everyone did something different. I was like, "I'm gonna need this person to take notes," and so we kind of went through that process together as a family.
Wow, and I think that's so important again as we talk about this village of children, and parents need a village too, and family is so important. Yes. And I like how you recognize, you're like, "Hold up, don't say nothing else. I need my support group here." You hit me with something heavy, some heavy artillery right now. Hold on, because that's so important. Because when you get information like that, your brain just goes in all different. You can be the most intelligent person, the most person who's emotionally stable, but when they tell you something about your baby, and when you hear the word cancer itself, we already know what cancer, and we've seen people who've had cancer and stuff. So immediately it's like, wait, hold up. So I think that you did, that was awesome, because you was like, hold on.
I had to. It was just way too much information. And it wasn't just the one doctor. They're like, "Oh, we're going to come. It's going to be a team of us." And, so I'm like, wait a minute, and I'm I can be really good because, again, I was in the healthcare field. And so, I kind of dealt with patients that had cancer and sickness and things like that. But again, never thinking that it was going to hit my home.
When it's your child.
I never thought. And so I'm like, wait a minute, but it kind of reminded me of when I was at CNA, And I used to always give those patients that extra care, that extra love.
Right.
And I always think about that. You never know you never know when you're going to be on that side. Right. So I'm like, some people that work in the healthcare field, you really have to be nice because it may be your loved one. You know what I mean? It may be your son, your daughter, your mom, your father, and so we really have to be,
you never know what you're going to, and I think that, the things that we do and the things that we go through is always preparing us for something. We don't know what it's preparing us for, but it always, in hindsight, when you look back on it, it prepared us for different things. And sometimes when we get hit with something, we like, oh, I'm not ready for that. But all along, God has already God has already prepared you for it. How did Sharif respond though how did you break it to him or even his siblings? How did that?
So believe it or not, Sharif really handled it well. I remember they told him, and he was like, Mom, they must be crazy. They told me I got cancer. And so I'm laughing. He was like a jokester. And I think after that, we were just like, he's going to get through this, And I remember, they would take him down, and like the first time he was in the back for like 4 hours.
Right.
And I'm like, oh, God. I mean, like I walked all around. I paced the hospital. It was just, oh, my goodness. And my son would be like, Mom, this is a small thing to a giant. And I was like, wow. And I remember just the process. It was 18 months. And I remember saying, he would say, Mom, and he would tell the doctors, he was like, I serve the God that my grandma served. And so he knew that this was like this really big God. And to me, it was like now he was allowing everything that I taught him, right? Because he went to Christian school, as a parent, say train a child in the way they should go. When they're old, they won't depart from it. So everything that I instilled in him, I was now seeing him walk it out.
Wow.
And so in so many words, he was my encouragement. When they would come, and sometimes they would come back, the first set of medicine affected 80% of his pancreas. Right. So he had something called necrosis pancreatitis. Yeah. So now he became a diabetic. And so I remember he used to say, Mom, don't cry. So every time the doctor came in, I would just, sit there and
like, I'm not going to cry.
And I would listen to the information. And I remember, after they would get done, I would say, okay, because they had a parent section in DuPont where you can go, like a lounge. Right. And I would say, okay, sure, I'm going to the parent lounge. And I would go over there and just cry and scream and holler. And I would go call my family. I'm like, oh my goodness, I'm getting more information. I'm overwhelmed. But I never allowed him to see me react. Right. And I think the way that he handled it is what allowed me to say, you know what? Because, they would tell him stuff, and he used to watch Law and Order, SVU or something. Oh, okay. And he would be there, and they would talk to him, and he would get right back on and I'm like, do you know what they just told him? Like, but I thought to myself, if he's not moved, then I don't need to be moved. Right. You know what I'm saying? I said, if he's going through this and he's handling it pretty good, I'm going to need to, I'm going to need to buckle up. And so that taught me to, really it taught me to have my faith strengthened in that moment. Right. Like, we think we have faith, but I'm telling you,
when you get hit with something, you're like, hold up. You're like,
oh, yeah.
But the fact that he exemplified and he responded to the way you raised him. And that's the thing, too. That's also, because even to a kid, that's a lot of information. Like, he know what cancer is. He's 17. He know what cancer is. And the fact that he was able to, small thing, what's the saying?
He would say it's a small thing to a giant.
Small thing to a giant. Like, who says that? Like, when they're going through something like this. So the fact that there's something that you put in him that he was able to be able to go through what he went through and not, break down and encourage you, though,
Oh, yeah.
He was your strength in the time you were trying to be strong for him, right?
Oh, my goodness. They'd be like, Mom, don't cry. Mom, I got this. And so I was like, okay, and I wouldn't let him see me. And I would go down and get, like, lunch for him sometimes if he couldn't walk. Like, sometimes they would let him go down. And so I would go down and get his lunch or breakfast. And he'd be like, Mom, what's taking you so long? But that's when I would, because I didn't want to do it in the room. So I would leave out and I would just, I had one girlfriend, Bonnie, and every morning, because that was my morning prayer partner, and I would call her, and I'm like, I just want to scream today. And because I would call her, like, right after rounds. So rounds is all this new information, all this stuff that's going on. Right. And so he was like, Mom, what's going on? I'm like, oh, no, I'll be right back up. But he knew, sometimes I was going down there having my moment. Right. But I just, never wanted to really do it like in front of him.
I think it's so important to, even though we're strong and we've been through stuff, you've been through stuff, and for us to step away and have a weak moment with God and weak moment and say, listen, this is it. I don't even know. Listen, flag on the play. I don't know what's going on right now. I don't even know how to handle, but somehow find the strength in your faith to be able to keep walking. And then, so we're gonna get back to Sharif and through the journey,
Sure.
but then we want to talk about another one of your children.
So my final was with James, and that was in 2021, March the 6th. I was in Denver, Colorado. My mom's sister passed away, and so most of us went to Denver. It was the first time my mom lost a sibling, and so me and most of my siblings went, except for my one sister. And James was home, and my oldest daughter was home, and my little son. So James 8, maybe he was like 6 or so, and they were back. And so the rest of us, me, my sister, and some of our kids went away. So I took Kayla with me, and so on my way to my aunt's service is when I got the phone call about James.
Wow.
And so
how old was James?
James was 18, so Sharif passed at 19
Right.
and James
Yeah,
passed
18.
at 18.
Okay, go ahead. You can finish.
Well, so pretty much with that, I remember just hearing the song, after you done all you can, just stand.
Yeah.
And I remember standing there like, okay, this is it. I don't know what to do. And so, and I remember having people say to me, like, what are you going to do now? And I was like, I'm going to trust God just as much. I'm going to need to with anything because I'm out here again, Lord, you know. And so,
like I'm out here again.
Yeah, I'm like, I'm out here, Lord. You're going to have to come pick me up, God. Come on.
Right. And then, you know, if you've gone through grief that, you know, some people don't even deal with in their lifetime, you know, some older, not even, you know, our parents aren't supposed to bury their children, you know, that's what they say, right? Parents aren't supposed to bury their children. We're supposed to bury our parents, you know, they grow old. But in this case, you've buried 3 children now, and such at a young age. And how do you I hear you talking about your faith of how, you know, that's how you get through. But how else, you know, with your faith and then your family, but what else, like, deep out in you and said, listen, I can't stay here. I can't sit here. You know, this is times 3, Lord. You got me out here in these streets again like this, Lord. Had any time, you know, being a woman of faith, have any time you said to God, yo, what's going on? Bro, like.
All the time, every day. I be like, God, look, what more you want out of me? I laugh. I always call myself Jobina. And I made that up because I'm Catrina and we think about Job, you know.
Right.
And so I'm like, God, you know, wow. And, you know, you always say that saying, you know, he always give the toughest battles to his strongest soldiers. And I'm like, ain't nobody out here trying to be strong.
I was like, Lord, don't make me be strong.
I'm like, I ain't trying to be,
Don't make me strong this way. Why you gotta find another way? Can I go lift some weights or something? Like,
and sometimes you're like, Lord, what more do you want out of me? You know,
Right.
At least that's kind of like, you know, I'm saying like, you know, in a sense, God, I've sacrificed, you know, in my mind. But the one thing I can say with them raising my kids, coming from a Christian background, we know that our kids were loaned. Right, God gives us these kids,
Right.
and it's really what we do. That's like if God gives you a gift, you know what I'm saying? The gift is yours. What are you going to do with that gift? Remember, the one man had the gift and he went and buried it, right? But somebody else, you know, they took that gift and they multiplied it. You get what I'm saying? And the person that had the one gift, he had 2 gifts, or however, he multiplied it. I think the one with 5 multiplied it,
right?
But the one that had 1, he didn't think it was significant enough, and so. You know, sometimes when we get our gifts, you know, and I'm thinking of using our kids as an example. What are we going to really pour into them? You know, what are we going to do? Like, and I'll be real. I used to think that I was not equipped, right? I was a young mom. I had my first child at a young age. And I'm like, God, I'm not equipped.
Right.
Like, why did, you use me to do this? But I remember every Friday night when we lived on 20th Street, I would get my kids and they were home from school and we would catch the bus to Springfield Mall because we lived right where Blessed Catherine Drexel was. And that was our Friday outing. We would go to Springfield Mall. It wasn't that big, you know, so they got lost because my 2 sons would always run off, which was James and Sharif. And but we would go there and we would go to like Friendly's or something.
Right.
And I made Friday night like family night. You know, and it was just those little things that I wanted to instill in them. And then, you know, of course, I'm going to church and going to vacation Bible school and, you know, things like that. And so I feel like, you know, sometimes I use this term and I say, God, I'm jealous, right? Because they're not here. I'm still here trying to get this thing right.
They're right with you. What's going on?
And I say, God, you know, you allowed me to pour into them, you know, and so you question God sometimes.
Right.
You know, they say you're not supposed to, but sometimes you have a conversation with God, you know, where you're like, okay, God, why am I here? Like, why am I going through this? You know, what more do you want out of me? But sometimes I have to just find a peace in that. Because if not, you'll wear yourself out, trying to get to the bottom of,
why this happened, what's going on. You said something really important about pouring into your kids. And I think one of the things, and then also, I'll go back to before you said pouring into your kids, how God has given our kids as loaners. Like, pretty much everything that we have here is a loan. Like, I've taught a lesson a couple weeks ago is how we're just managers. We're literally just managing everything. That's stewardship, right? That we're managing everything and everybody around us. It's a season for everything. Nothing is permanent. Nothing is permanent, right? We know as you get older, and nothing permanent. Things that was up, down now. But the fact that God has given our children to us as gifts, and it is so important. That's why Parents and Their Purpose is here. It's so important for us to know our purpose in our children's life is to pour into them, so that when they do depart, when they do go, that they're able to be sustained, right? So we don't know how long we have. It's evident we don't know how long we have with our children, because you've had children in ages have passed away. So we never know how long we have our children. We also can look at the news. Right? Oh, yeah. We can see the crime. We can see not even just crime, though. We can see, again, SIDS. We can see cancer. Like, our children are dying the numbers are so high in every area, right? So you don't know when your children's going to be deceased. You don't know when anybody... You don't even know when you're going to go. So it's so important to value relationships, and especially in our children. Because sometimes as parents, you're just trying to work, you're trying to feed your kids, you're trying to do all these stuff. And
trying to maintain,
right. So it's like, you trying to do all that, and sometimes we forget that our children still need our quality time. Because what you were talking about on Friday nights, that's quality time. Spending that time investing in them. Because I have this saying that we are the bows, the parents are the bows, and our children are arrows. So they're going to go in a direction that we send them, right? Sure. And the only way that they're going in a direction if the bow is right. Right, if the bow is lined up right, and that we're imparting to them where they need to go. So they may not go right then and there, later on, like when Sharif was going through something, he was able to pull out of him what you put in him. I remember one of the things that I thought about as you were talking, though, is that remember in the Bible where Jesus was 2 loaves, 2 fish, 2 loaves. I always mix that up. All right, 2 fish and 5 loaves. 2 fish and 5 loaves, because there's 2 different stories in there, right? Because one was more fish and one was more. So the 2 fish and 5 loaves, and that came out of a mother packed the little boy's lunch. Wow. Now, okay. I never. Yeah. Think about that. She had him prepared. She had her son prepared because they going out, he's going out or whatever. But 2 fish and 5 loaves, and because she prepared him, packed his lunch, right, gave him what he needed, he was able to then help and be able to fill the multitude. So I think about this is, what are we putting in our kids that is going to be able to help someone else? There's so many times that our kids are going through stuff, like even if the siblings were going through something in school, if they found a friend and say, listen, my brother just passed away, or my brother's got cancer, and that friend is equipped because their parent equipped them to how to help with people, right? How to be compassionate, how to be kind, how to be gentle, how to be loving. So if we're pouring this into our children, that they can help the next child, because again, why do we have to wait till they become adults? Right. So true. So I'm going to back up a little bit. You were saying there's so much. I know. I'll be going on a tangent sometimes.
It was so powerful. And I'm going back to 2 things. One, the quality time and spending it with our kids. So the one thing sometimes that I get into my little moment and I think about is, I was a young mom, right? And I was having my kids, and I was studying, trying to make sure I had a couple dollars, make sure they had clothes, make sure, I was doing things. And I did have them in different programs. My one, Sharif was in Project Forward Leap, an educational program. James did People's Light Theater for years. He was acting. 1 year, James, he did wrestling, football, boxing. He won the wrestling trophy 2 years in a row. He ran track. He was in the regular choir, the honors choir, and the all-males course at school. But they had did so much. And I remember one day, like now that they're not here, and I remember going back to God, and I said, Lord, forgive me in so many words. I say, because I was raising them in so many words in such a hurry. I can't wait till they get older.
Yeah,
18.
wow.
My one son passed at 19 and one at 18. And I'm saying all of that to say I rushed those small moments as a parent because, again, like I said earlier, I didn't feel like I was sufficient enough to raise these kids because I was a young mom. So I didn't think I really had what it took, right? Because I'm out here and I'm struggling. I'm going to school and I'm doing this. And I remember sometimes I was going to Widener and I would take Sharif with me to Widener. I was working at Widener Monday through Friday, 8 to 4. And then I would go to class from 6:30 to 9:50. And so some days in between, I would meet them because I lived in Parkside. And I would get Sharif and I say, come on, let's go have dinner at the cafeteria, and then I would make him sit in the building, make sure he didn't get in trouble. He was studying and stuff. But I'm saying all that to say I had rushed so much that now when I look back, I'm like, they were precious moments. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? They were precious moments that I should have enjoyed more. And so now I'm saying, to that mother out there, enjoy your children. I know it's overwhelming. I know sometimes they're doing so much, but look at your kids. The other thing as well, I wanted to go back when we were talking about what are we pouring into our children, and talking about our children having a purpose. My daughter Kayla, she's 17 now, and I remember Kayla was 5. She went to Frederick Douglass Christian School, and I remember one day she came home and she said, Mom, I'm like an octopus. And I said, what do you mean? She said, I have all these many arms and I can do all these things. Kayla was in kindergarten she was drawing in kindergarten. Okay. She was making all the kids little like arm casts or something she was doing. But every year, so this is like 5. At 7, Kayla began to sew. At like 9, she was doing balloon arches, right?
Oh, wow.
And so 12, 13, she began to write. She began to do her hair. About 14, 15, Kayla does t-shirts. My shirt is here today. Kayla does so much. But I laugh and I go back and I'm like, at 5, she told me, Mom, I was like an octopus with all of these arms. And so when I think about that, at a little girl, in so many words, she knew that she had so many talents. Right. But it was like, what was I going to do with that? Because again, when kids are like sometimes all active and things, it can be overwhelming because they're all over the place. And at that point, I knew that I had to start pouring into her because she had something more to offer. And so to say that to the parent, when you're raising your kids, give kids love. Give them some form of attention. They need attention. Right. Sometimes we can't just, push them off to the side. I don't really bother right now. Sometimes something else may actually be going on. Yeah. Within them that they're going through or they want to express. See what their interests are. See what they want to do. Get them involved. Like, that was my thing. I'm like, look, I'm going to make sure my kids do something. Right. I will walk from Parkside to Widener, on Saturdays, 7 o'clock in the morning. My son Sharif was in the program. I was the first parent there. Right. I left. It took 35 minutes, but we would get up 6 o'clock. It was a sacrifice. Who wants to do this on Saturday? Right. 3 Saturdays out the month. But I made sure I did it. So that I can pour into my kids. Right. And I think that, like you said, that is so important about pouring into our kids because, we all know parents are busy. We're busy. Oh, yeah. But sometimes we find time to do stuff for ourselves, but then when it comes to our kids, it's like, well, listen, you here, I got food for you, I got shelter for you, and I got hot water or whatever, clothes, and that's not enough, parenting before. I remember, I don't know about you growing up, probably, listen, you got a house, don't you? You got some food, don't you? You got some clothes, don't you? Even though they hand-me-downs, you got them clothes, don't you? And a lot of times, parents, and no fault of their own, that's just the way the society was, that you didn't tap into your children's emotional needs. You didn't tap into your children's needs for attention and care, and even for them to be talented. Like, when kids are little, there was not back in the day, a lot of programs where they put their kids in and stuff like that. Listen, we're going to go to work and we're going to feed you and you're going to go to bed. Like, that's just what it is. And that's honestly what it is. Parents didn't know, like, there was more to parenting than that. Yes. And now that we live in a society, and a lot of times when things go wrong with our children, they say, well, where was the parents at? But then we're not allowing our parents to have the tools and really understanding that, listen, that's more than parenting. That's the minimum that's the Maslow law. That's the minimum you're supposed to do. But you need to tap into them. And the fact that your daughter at 5, she realized that she was an octopus. Now, some other parents like, you're an octopus, girl, you always trying to be some animal. Get out of here. You know what I mean? But the fact that, and as she's grown, you poured into her. So now she has these multiple businesses and she's succeeding where she at now. And I think that is so important that we continue to pour into our children. And then let your children know, listen, make a plan. Make the vision, make a plan that they're involved so that they know that they are necessary and that they're valuable. So you go through all this and so where we are now with you, even that was just recent with your last son, that was 2 years ago.
2 years ago. So now, I see Nehemiah Hope. So talk a little bit about where you at now, of how, one, you were able to continue to move through life and living life new and different, because life is different now.
Oh, yes.
So share with us of how you live your life now and the things that you do and how do you serve and what's going on with your other kids and how you still be able to be the fabulous mom that you are.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that. So kind of where I'm at now, in the Nehemiah Hope, we actually, so long story short, when Sharif was in the hospital, we talked about, at this point, I didn't think he was going to pass away, right? And so we talked about having a foundation called the Hope Foundation. Mm-hmm. My daughter that passed away from cancer, because again, he was the second child. Her name was Janaya Hope. And so we wanted to have a Hope Foundation. And with the Hope, the main goal was our clothing would be to help people still maintain their dignity.
Right.
Because especially if you're dealing with cancer and things like that, people, like my son still wanted to get dressed every day. He still wanted to feel, he was 17. So Mama went, Nike tights or whatever they were wearing. Mm-hmm. So he still wanted, nice little clothes or whatever, because he still was a young man. And so at that point we were talking about coming out with the clothing line for people, and especially for those that were dealing with cancer. So the Nehemiah Hope, his middle name is Nehemiah. So that's where the Nehemiah Hope came from. So now we do have a foundation. With the foundation, we help families. So my whole mission is to help families that are dealing with crisis. But I have a strong emphasis on those that are dealing with cancer. Right. And so with the foundation, we, like for Cherie's birthday, we went to Children's Hospital in Delaware, DuPont, and we fed the cancer patients. So we were able to partner with Chick-fil-A, and we were able to feed 75 people. So we did that twice. We did it for his birthday in April, and then we did it for Christmas. 2 times we were able to go to, because it's only been a couple of years, we were able to go to the Ronald McDonald House. Mm-hmm. And we'll be going there on February the 6th, and we'll be serving the families. And so what you're able to do is go in and actually cook a meal. And so it'll be me and 7 more volunteers will go in and be able to do that. My ultimate goal, and I'm moving forward towards that before this year is out, is to be able to help more financially with assistance. And so so most times when people buy T-shirts, the money from the T-shirts go to help somebody that's dealing with cancer. And so a lot of times I do a lot of maybe backline advocating, because I've dealt with cancer and I know of some of the cancer foundations. That's another thing I want to do, is make sure people are getting the assistance that they need. When my son got sick, I didn't work. I couldn't work. I was at the hospital. So my whole life stopped. So how are you still going to maintain? So I had foundations like the Devin Stills Foundations. It was just so many, I can't even think of all of them. But since then, I've been able to help at least 4 or 5 different people. And I sometimes look and I see it on Facebook, and people are saying, I was diagnosed with cancer. And so my goal is to go in and say, hey, what type of supports are you getting? The other thing we offer is the conference call. And so we do that. We're back doing that. I kind of paused after my other son passed away in 2021, but we just started back. So we're now in June. We started back last month. Mm-hmm. Every second Tuesday of the month, we're having our conference call at 7 p.m. And what I learned, and I think earlier in the conversation, you talked about was I receiving counseling, right? Mm-hmm. Now you're a parent, you're hearing your child has this diagnosis, or even if it's yourself, how are you dealing with it?
Right.
And so that was something that I noticed. DuPont was really good with art therapy and things like that for the child, but they didn't have it for the parent. Yeah. So who am I? Of course I had my family to kind of talk to and scream with and all that, but I'm noticing a lot of people don't have, like myself, a village. Mm-hmm. And so that's where another part of the foundation where we come in at, where we offer support. We're on Tuesdays, we have different topics on that particular Tuesday. And sometimes I tell people, if you want to call on it and just scream. Because some people, you're going through this and you never really have a chance to process the diagnosis. And so how are we walking, through that? And so that's a part of the foundation that we do. So my next goal is to have a place that will be able to do that a little bit more. Maybe someone's going to go get their cancer treatment today and you come home, but you're by yourself. You don't want to go home. So you might want a form of support. I do want to go back a little bit and just share. I think we talked a little before we jumped on the air, and I was talking about your sister April. Right. And I was saying how when Sharif passed, I think it was James passed away, I remember she came back, and I think it was like Alaska or so.
Yeah, she was in Alaska.
Yeah, she was in Alaska doing nursing, and I remember she came back and she was saying, I don't know what night I'm going to come. She had inboxed me on Facebook, and I remember she came, whatever day it was that she came, but by the time she got there, I'm like, I am so tired. And I remember going upstairs, and I say, April, I'm tired. And I remember she just sat at the foot of my bed. I had chairs in my room, and for 2 hours, she just allowed me to rest and sleep. And so I think of that, even though I didn't personally go through cancer at that moment, I was dealing with grief. But I think about that sometimes with the cancer patient. Sometimes you go get this treatment, you're drained out. Some people don't have anybody to go home to.
Right.
And so that's another part, that we're going to eventually offer as a form of support. Yeah. You might want to come after your treatment and have somewhere, safer where you can just come and relax, for an hour or two where you feel okay with going back, home if you're going by yourself or things like that. So that's where, the Nehemiah Hope comes in at.
I think that's awesome because you, like I said earlier on here, you always find a way of service, you always find a way to serve people. That's how I know it's genuine in your heart. And I believe it's come from the foundation, your spiritual foundation. But yeah, I think that's cool because a lot of times, when somebody's been diagnosed with cancer, the mind and the brain, release all these chemicals in our body, right? So they kind of do things that we didn't expect we were going to do or whatever because the chemicals, the stressors and things like that causes us to respond in a particular way where we just don't know what to do, where to go. And when you go through chemotherapy, I've had cancer, I had lymphoma, and when you go through no matter what type of chemotherapy you go through, you're still going to be tired, you're still going to be exhausted, and for you to be able to offer a place of hope, to be able to support them emotionally, because a lot of times, a lot of people when somebody pass away or somebody's sick, the first thing that we want to do is bring them food. It's like, here you go, I'm going to feed your family, listen, I can't even eat, okay?
Right, I'm not even eating right now.
But that emotional support that keeps you going, to let you know that you matter, you're necessary, there's a purpose for you here, this is not the end, and you're going to get through this. And I think to be able to have a place to do that in an open place, even when you said that somebody could call and scream, I remember, with my kids going through different things, when my sister passed away, I wanted to call and scream. When my little girls, when I got the girls and they didn't even want to live. Okay, God, what's up? I want to scream. So to be able to add support in areas that we wouldn't typically get support in, I think is pretty cool. So if you guys, I'm telling you, how do they reach you? How do they figure this out?
Sure. So I'm on Facebook under my name, Catrina Jacobs. Or you can go to my website at walkoffaithnow.com, and you can go on there. There's an area where you can leave a message, and to go to my email, and you can reach me like that. You reach me from those areas. But I do check my inbox, so sometimes people will inbox or things like that. So yeah.
Okay, so I'm telling you guys, reach out to Catrina Jacobs, Nehemiah Hope. She is sitting here, she's giving us some jewels. And listen, again, she has dealt with tragedy in different areas, especially when it had her share of grief as a mother, but continue to live life and serve people. Also, talk about your book, because you have a book.
Sure, yes.
Yeah.
So my book is actually on Amazon as well. You can pull my name up, Catrina Jacobs.
Let me show you all this book.
Sure. I brought her a little gift today. Of course, I knew she already had the book, but I said, you know what, you can bless somebody else with it.
Absolutely.
And so the book is on Amazon, A Walk of Faith. So it's a 31-day devotional, and it's a prayer journal. And so a lot of times people don't journal. And so I tell people, journal your walk. Journal. I remember going back, even when I was writing the book, I remember going back to my journal, when I was in the hospital with Sharif. And I still have that. I remember some days I would have a whole bunch to say. I would say the doctor came in and all this. And I remember one day I had 2 lines, victory belongs to Jesus. And I remember for a week straight, I kept saying, victory belongs to Jesus. I didn't have anything else to say. And so that's where the journal comes in at, because you're now walking out your faith. And so you can go to my website, walkoffaithnow.com, or you can, hit me up on Facebook, inbox me if you want a signed copy. I will be out this weekend with signed copies at an event. If you want more information, you can inbox me for that information. So
you could tell them about the event.
It's actually, I don't have the address right off. It's going to be an event. I'm a part of another event. It's going to be a vendor event that's going to take place in Upper Darby.
Okay.
And so it's another cancer foundation, and I'll be, partnering along with and so I have a team with some material. I have some books that'll be out there for sale, and I just want to be there, to be support.
Okay.
For those.
That's awesome. So reach out to her. I'm telling you, you're a jewel. You're a wealth of knowledge. And experience, and I like how you just just let this stuff just get to you. You kind of just move forward. And how are your other children doing? That's what I wanted to ask about.
I can say they're coming along. Mm-hmm. It is a process. One thing that I always say I never wanted to fall on them where they feel like I'm putting my pressure on them, but I say to people or my mom or someone, the people that's in my corner, I say not only am I going through myself, but I still have. So now I have a 9-month-old, my oldest daughter, and then Kayla, and then Jayden, so altogether 4. Mm-hmm. And so I say when I grieve, I'm not just grieving for myself.
Right.
I may grieve this week, and they may grieve. 1 week it goes to Jayden,
right.
1 week it goes to Kayla. And the baby doesn't understand. And so sometimes what happens is that they grieve in circles, and so it's being a mom and dealing with it. It's very complex.
Yeah.
But I can say we're getting through it. Jayden's in acting school. He's doing really well. Kayla's doing really well. So it's a balance. Just trying to make sure emotionally, they're well.
Right. You said something when my daughters was on here a couple of weeks ago. One of the, Donna, the 15-year-old, she said that grief, it's not like these steps, right? It's not like you go through these steps and she said there are different things and they're not in order. And sometimes you may not even go through some of them, but you'll go through other ones again and again and again. So again, we know that grief is a journey. Grief is a journey, and you're never gonna listen. If you're old enough to love, you're old enough to grieve. So people think that babies don't grieve. Well, they grieve too. So everybody grieves. So, but I like the fact that you guys are moving forward. That you're taking care of business out here. And not allowing that to keep you back. Before we close out, do you have anything to say to anybody who's dealing with any other situations you deal with, or even just themselves who may want to give up at times? And, as a mom, like, what do you have to say to people? Because people from all walks of life are watching.
Sure. Well, first I want to say something to you because I watched. And I'm an emotional person. I ain't getting emotional today. But I was there. April's my friend. I was there when Tamika passed. I was there, when her husband passed. So the way that you actually raise your nieces, I was there and I seen it. And to watch them now and to really see where they are with the love that you have poured into them, that means a lot. And so for you to open your heart, and I'll say you never treated them like your nieces. You always talk about my daughter, so you treated them like your own. And so that means a lot. The other thing is, like you say, grief is no set order. What else I would say is be a support system. A lot of times I have some friends say, well, I didn't know what to say. And again, like I say, when April came, she sat there. That meant more to me than anybody else that came and brought me everybody was bringing the same thing over and over again. And some people were saying some of the craziest things. Like I said earlier, what are you going to do now? I'm like, what do you mean I want to do? Like, my kids aren't, what do you mean? I still have to get up. I have to live. The other kids still, I remember, just going back a little bit when Cherie passed and I still had James. I remember one day James said, Mom, what are you going to cook for dinner? I had never cooked. I didn't cook for like a year. Seriously. And one day I was like, yo, I got to really feed the kids. I mean, so I'm saying that to say you still have to get up, Take, a lot of people, the other thing is that people will say, if you need me, call me. Guess what? I'm going to pick up the phone. Look, today is a bad day. Like, people know I'm really strong, but guess what? When I really get weak, I do pick up that phone. I'll say today I'm just not emotionally well. Like, this week was my daughter's birthday. My daughter would have been 19. And I couldn't understand why I felt the way I felt all day long. And I was like, you know what? Today's her birthday. So sometimes you still feel it, you still go through it. Do I handle it the same way I did 19 years ago? I'm kind of working my way through it. You never know when it's going to hit you. But again, take the supports that you have. Again, like you said, it takes a village to raise a child. It takes a village sometimes to help you get through grief. Yeah. Like, don't think you're like all the way up here. I'm real high. And some days I'm like, okay, I don't want to get out of bed for a week. What I'm saying? And so I think also people don't express that or share that with people. Mm-hmm. And so a lot of times I just want to be real, to say, reach out for help, get what it is that you need. The last piece I did want to talk about was trauma. It's a lot with the trauma of dealing with grief. It can be very traumatic. Seek the help. I went through Christian counseling. I think for me, the best part for me was that I had a family. My family, are ministers and pastors. Yeah. And so I was able to lean in a little bit more and, get therapy, like through my doctor's office and things like that, but reach out for help. Don't think that you don't need help. And sometimes you may not have help for a while. It's okay to sometimes say, okay, you know what? Now I'm at this point. I'm at this crossroad. And help may not just be a regular therapist. It could be like a women's group or something that you're doing just for yourself. That's good. So, just keep that in mind.
All right. Well, thank you, Katrina, for coming. I certainly appreciate the candid conversation, transparency behind, this is a very tough topic for most people.
Yes.
And we don't talk about this in our community, but we deal with this in our community, and allow you to really teach us of how you got through it and how you can help someone else to get through it. So certainly thank you for taking the time out and coming on to the show. As you know, we are here every Thursday, 7 p.m., Parenting with a Purpose. Again, the aim is to bring back their responsibility, nobility, and beauty back into parenting. No matter what the situation is, you can still parent. So we I implore you to tap in, like, share, and invite, or share it with somebody that, who's a parent, or just family members, just to say, because, again, we all need a support system. Next week, my guest will be a mother, a single mom, who has 2 autistic teenagers. Actually, one is a teenager now, and one is, I think, 7. Who she's a nurse, so she's going to school, she's working full time, and she's going to school, and she's raising 2 autistic teens. Again, the autism, most people don't talk about it in the Black community. So I'm bringing here another guest, another mom who's here in Chester, who's living it, and who's able to do it successfully. So again, tune us back here at 7 p.m. Thank you for joining.